I go for the most megaphone raise of all time. I mean, like, if you're at the table and you see a reg do this versus a recreational, you are just praying for the recreational to fold, right? Yo guys, what's up? Ben Ababi here, and thank you for joining me for episode 9 of Road Back to High Stakes. Now, I know in last week's episode, there was a lot of doom and gloom, particularly around the RTAing and botting that's happening on Ignition. So this week, we're going to make sure that we stay as far away from that as possible. And with that in mind, I'm very happy that I'm able to post a winning graph for what feels like the first time in a very long time. So as we can see in the graph, we had a pretty plain sailing week and we made about 24k USD and ran around EV. But if we do change it to big blinds, it does tell a bit of a different story. We were up about 16 buy-ins and finished the week at about plus 9 buy-ins-ish. We ran pretty bad at 1k towards the end of the week, but then did okay at 2k and 3k. So that's why you see this big drop off in the big blind graph, but you don't really notice it in the dollar graph. So based on a lot of the things I talked about in last week's video, I have been cutting back hugely on my Ignition volume. I've been increasing my volume on ACR, which you may argue isn't a great idea given the current botting situation on that site, but what choice do I really have? My only options of grinding are ACR, GG, and Ignition, so yeah, my options aren't brilliant to be honest with you. I'm then increasing my volume on 1k on GG, and let me tell you now, the absolute demolition that I've already experienced on GG does not seem to be letting up. If anything, it seems to be getting a lot worse. Obviously, a very small sample, but it's never fun feeling like you're getting piped constantly on a specific site. But who knows, things might turn around at some point, so I will be continuing to play there. Anyway, on to today's hands. So we have several hands today, but among those, we have got an 11k pot at 3k NL versus a very tight recreational. We've got a reg egregiously spewing it off versus our flop and turn donk bets. And we made what seemed to be an extremely standard fold at the time, but once they showed their cards, it was definitely not standard. Here we get that pocket sevens in the cutoff and we go ahead and open. We get 3-bet by player that we didn't have many hands on, around 35 hands. The only thing I would say about this player is that they definitely were not a big recreational. I decide to defend. We see a very interesting 5-4-3 with a flush draw. Now, I think most of you watching, or a lot of people watching this, would be like, okay, great, this is a board that we get to donk on. And that is definitely true. My main concern here is that this is a board that while we might know that we need to donk, maybe people don't realize that every single combo in our range for the most part is going to want to be mixing in donk here. So we're talking like King Jack of Hearts, King Queen of Hearts, Queen 10 of Hearts, all those kind of hands. Either way, I go ahead and donk, unsurprisingly. And I did look at the sim afterwards, and this is donking around 50% of the time with our range, and our combo does donk fairly often as well. Villain raises, and we are going to see that a fair amount. I definitely want to be playing some shoves with my combo, and if I'm going to do it with a pocket sevens combo, it's always going to be one with a club. This time we do elect to just call. I think this is probably one of the few turns, a 7 and a 6, where we pretty much get to range donk. The real question to ask is what size do we get to range donk here? Depending on how good the turn is for our range dictates the sizing that we're able to go. So maybe there'll be situations that are similar to this where you only get to donk 10% or 15% pot. So as you can see in game, I went around 15%. So I was umming and ahhing. Clearly at the time, I wasn't exactly sure what sizing I needed to donk, but I definitely did decide that I'd want to donk. Again, I've looked at the sim for this, and there is a mix between 15% and 27%, or 33% should I say, and the 33% is preferred as a single sizing scheme, but obviously couldn't know that at the time. Villain tanks for a while and shoves. Obviously we have a very easy snap call. Yes, we are going to run into pocket sixes sometimes, but what are we going to do? We can't exactly fold a set. So we do call, and this time we do find pocket jacks with a club. And I gotta say, regardless of what the sim says, I think that having the jack of clubs as in position here is a real blunder. When they have the club, I'm just going to be much more oriented towards sets, 2 pairs, and straights. So I think shoving any combo of jacks with a club is probably not the way that they want to approach this spot. And going back to what I said earlier in the hand, particularly in a spot where I do believe, myself included, that population is going to be way over strong here and not have those random folds from like the jack high or the queen high flush draws that are likely going to have to just bet fold on the turn. So on to the splashiest hand of the week, and very questionable to say the least. So we get an open from a new player to 3x on the button. So I know you can see that there are 46 VPIP. The reason for their 46 VPIP is they were playing many tables and they were battling three-handed. I was playing a number of tables of three-handed. My reads on this player were that they were very aggressive, very barrel happy, and were using pretty optimal sizes. My thinking is that maybe they're like a high-stake live reg or something like that and we're playing online. I don't believe that they were a recreational player though. So we defend 5 deuce of clubs in the big blind and the flop comes 10-5-3. We've got middle pair and a backdoor flush draw. We check and villain pretty quickly goes half pot. Again, this is kind of a good sizing for this texture. The fact that this player was c-betting very, very high frequency over most boards, our raising frequency naturally will go up. I think we are going to find more bet folds and just clean up a whole load of equity when we go ahead and check raise this combo. Perhaps villain is mindful of the fact that they're c-betting a lot and people are attacking their check raises, or that I was attacking their check raises this session, because they do elect to 3-bet the flop to around $265. Don't think we can do anything else but call here. If we had like a 5 deuce of spades, I definitely would fold, but with the extra equity of the backdoor flush draw, I'm definitely not going to be folding my hand. I also don't want to shove my combo. So we see a 4 of diamonds, and this is a little bit similar to the pocket 7th hand. So is this now a spot that we want to be playing leads? I think the answer is absolutely yes. My main issue here is that when I know imposition is going to be c-betting very, very aggressively, I am going to be widening my value threshold of my check raises on the flop. That is going to include a whole load of king 10, queen 10, jack 10, 10, 9, 10, 8, and that makes up a lot of combos in my range. So I do think there are going to be donks because I believe that we do check raise and then hit the 4 fairly often, but I definitely don't think it's going to be a range lead. The other thing to mention is that we do pretty well as a check call with our hand. We have very, very high equity, so it's not like we're just going to be folding the turn versus a bet anyway. I think there may be some more merits to be donking a hand like 5-4, for example, that we can kind of stack over pairs versus what seems to be a very aggressive player. So I do go ahead and check the turn. Villain checks back and we see a very interesting 3 of diamonds. So there are like infinite things that we could talk about in this spot, but I'm just going to name a couple of things that I was thinking in game. So the first thing to mention is that on the turn, as I said, I think there definitely would be donks. And I think in theory, those donks are going to be coming mainly from the bottom portion of the range. When I say that, I mean like the 5-6s, 5-3s, 5-4s, straights, flush draws, etc. Not many of those kind of 10x combos. However, in reality and versus an opponent that I don't really know that well and that potentially could be a recreational, I'm going to be donking the turn way less because I think my fold equity goes down drastically. When the 3 of diamonds does come on the river, I am naturally going to arrive with way more good hands than I ordinarily should. I'm going to have more 6-7, I'm going to have more 5-3, I'm going to have more 4-3, 2-3, ace-3. There's going to be so many value combos that fill up. My only concern is whether or not I think imposition is going to fold over pairs, which I think is a very, very large portion of the range. And to be honest with you, I don't know. I have absolutely no idea if that's going to happen. You're going to get some players who are just going to be like, oh, they have no bluffs, so I'm just going to fold them over pairs here. And then you're going to have some players that are going to go, well, the pot's 600 already. If they got me, they got me. We are pretty much going to be guessing. I guess there is some argument to check and then win versus some kind of spicy ace high, but those are few and far between. And I think that bluffing and making some of the value hands fold outweighs check calling versus the bluffs. I can't really see imposition finding that many bluffs. They're quite unnatural, to be honest with you. So with all of that in mind, I decide to donk. Question is, what sizing do I donk? I'm repping very, very polar here, so I just decide to donk all in as my only sizing. So before I show what happens, what do people think of this line? Is my thought process completely flawed? Should I just play theory and donk the turn like a normal person with my combo? Or do we think that after we do check the turn and then we see this specific river, we just do have a fist pump bluff? Well, the reality of the situation is that we have been 3-bet on the flop by bottom pair, and somehow they have river trips, so this time it didn't go very well. In this hand on ACR, I think it's fair to say that I could not have telegraphed the strength of my hand any more if I tried. It was an absolute megaphone. So we get dealt king 3 suited on the button and we go ahead and open. We're about 200 big blinds at a 15-30 table with the big blind who is a recreational. Now, my reads on this recreational player were that, I cannot understate this enough, they were the most honest recreational of all time. Basically, telegraph the strength of their hand, don't bluff, doesn't like to take thin value spots, pretty much just telegraphs the strength of their hand constantly. They go ahead and 3-bet very, very small. You might argue that the fact that they telegraph their hands, should we really be defending king 3 suited? But we're very deep, and also our playability, I know that's a very, very fish term, but our playability here is extremely good versus a player who will not fight back. So I go ahead and call, and I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest with you. I think we should just take a moment to marvel at this board. Unbelievable spot flopping trips here on 9-3-3. And when we see the big bet go in on the flop, you better believe that this is a value hand. It might be ace king and it might be ace queen, but the fact that they 3-bet the big blind, which they never do, and the fact that they bet big on this texture suggests to me that we are in a very good spot here. I think that given how deep we are, we just want to be raising very, very aggressively. So we go for the small raise, not expecting any folds here, to be honest with you. Maybe they'll fold ace queen. They snap call. I think it's very fair to say now that we can almost guarantee that this is a 9x plus, very likely to be overpairs. They then donk for around 60% pot. I think this would be a big mistake to call based on the fact that we know that this player likes to play honestly, and we need to get as much money in there as possible before a potential scare call rolls off. I go for the most megaphone raise of all time. I mean, like, if you're at the table and you see a reg do this versus a recreational, you are just praying for the recreational to fold, right? I think I could make it a bit bigger, given that we've defined the recreational's range as actually very, very strong. But I thought there was the odd occasion that they might have ace king, so I didn't really want them to fold that, even though I do block a king. They snap call the turn, and we see a 5, and they check to us. We just have an extremely easy shove now for 1/3 pot. And it doesn't take the recreational that long to call ace-9 offsuit. To be honest with you, I am beyond shocked that this was in the 3-bet range pre-flop, but the small 3-bet size does kind of make sense to a not very, very strong hand. But this time, it has gone very well, winning the 11.5k pot. So on to the most egregiously weird, potentially suspicious hand that I've played in a long time. Although, let's be honest, this is on Ignition, so every other hand is very, very weird. So maybe this is just the norm now. Either way, we do get an open from a very strange statted player running about 33/12. Didn't seem like a massive recreational, didn't seem like a reg, just seemed like, let's just call them a thing. So I go ahead and 3-bet ace queen of spades in the big blind versus an under the gun min open. We flop second pair on king queen 6. We also have a backdoor flush draw. I think you can go 1/3 or you can go very small. I go 20% on this board and bet range. Villain calls, and when they call, they're just going to have a bunch of like pairs and open-enders and ace-10s and that kind of thing. You can use a block sizing if you want to split here. I prefer a single sizing approach, and I'm going to be using 2/3 or half. An ace-queen is not going to find its way into a bet with either of those sizings, so I check. Villain use a relatively normal and good size 2/3 pot. I think we just have a very mandatory turn call here. Nothing more to be said about that. You may argue that having ace queen of spades is good because we do triple block 2 pairs here, but I think it's kind of negligible either way. Villain very quickly shoves the river for around pot. I think our hand makes an okay bluff catcher in normal circumstances. I don't know what this player was capable of or up to. It is relatively difficult to find bluffs here. Yes, there will be some jack 10 that chooses to follow through, but I think that at least some of the time those hands are going to check back. The other thing to mention is that I just have plenty of king X here. King Jack, King 10, King 9, King 8, King 7. Loads of hands like that that are definitely going to be more incentivized to calling. And then I will have the occasional pocket aces and then also plenty of boats as well. I won't have jacks, but I will have kings and queens. So I think with all of that in mind, I don't really fall that well into my bluff catching region. Again, it might be a mix in theory, but I do decide to fold. And for some unbelievably unknown and godly reason, in position absolutely windmills the 10-3 of spades, completely demolishing our soul. So honestly, I have absolutely no idea what is going on here. Is this just a mega well? I mean, to be honest with you, it looks that way, but yeah, I am completely at a loss this hand. I've been destroyed. So that's going to do it for the hands and the video today, guys. Thank you so much for watching again. And just a quick reminder, we do have the Discord server where people are discussing hands, their poker journey, and general experiences about being a poker player. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and check that out in the comments below. But until next time, take care, and I'll see you at the tables.